We at Inner Picture Stories are delighted to present the IPS t-shirts. T-shirts that change the world. Not only does each t-shirt design tell a story and carry a message of light waiting to be spread in your life and to those around you, but with each purchase, you also get to choose the cause you would like to support, where parts of your money will go. The causes that these shirts support vary from the environment to animals to those struggling with mental health issues, suicidal thoughts, loneliness, and diseases such as cancer. For further information about the IPS t-shirts and about the good causes you can support, simply go to innerpicturestories.com/shirt and take a look at these stunning t-shirts that can change the world. Welcome to the Inner Picture Stories podcast. My name is Jellis Vaas, your host and the founder of Inner Picture Stories, the educational platform on life. I hereby invite you to come on a journey with me. In each episode, we will dive into the life of an inspiring person seeking lessons of wisdom about life and the world we live in. Answers that you can take away and use in your own life. It's true that no one ever said life would be easy, but it's also true that no one ever said you had to do it alone. So get ready and let the journey begin.
I talk to people from all walks of life, a homeless man, a businessman, an elderly woman, a teenage boy. And all these people, they looked very different on the outside, but many of them had really similar sentiments on life. The small talk is almost like you're putting on this forced veneer in front of trying to have these conversations and be friendly and just talk about things that don't really matter but just fill up space. Whereas big talk, you can almost relax into answering it because it's just speaking from the heart and from the mind of who you really are.
This is episode 016 with Kalina Silverman. Welcome everyone to another episode here on the Inner Picture Stories podcast. Glad to have you join us. In this episode, we have invited Kalina Silverman, founder of Big Talk, to talk about the importance of having more meaningful conversations and how to have more of these deeper conversations with others and skip the small talk to move on to Big Talk. Big Talk is a platform that first started as a social experiment by Kalina. Now a more thorough retelling of the personal story behind why Kalina started Big Talk, I let her tell you in the interview. Today, Big Talk has developed into a platform and movement that inspires and enables people to connect on a deeper level with one another. One way is through the Big Talk card game, which is a deck of questions that are universal, meaning any human being could answer it, open-ended, so you can't answer it with a simple yes or no, and meaningful, drawing forth a life story. There are various other ways and suggestions on how to engage in Big Talk with family members, co-workers, friends, and even strangers on the platform of Big Talk that I highly recommend you check out. It's honestly vital that we talk about the importance of having more meaningful conversations with others and how to develop this skill. There are enough studies and data to show that humanity is experiencing a real epidemic of loneliness, even though in this day and age we are more connected than ever. While there is more than one reason for this increase in loneliness, technology is a huge factor. The way we communicate may have improved, but the overall lifestyle changes have made us more isolated. It is important to take advantage of more opportunities to have face-to-face interactions with other people. And when we do interact, we should not merely stick to small talk, but move to Big Talk where true connectedness happens. Meaningful conversations is strongly associated with a greater well-being and consequently better quality relationships with our friends, family, partner, co-workers, and even strangers. I hope you'll not only enjoy this chat with me and Kalina Silverman, but also gain some valuable knowledge and information from it on how to have better conversations and skipping the small talk. Enjoy. Kalina, a warm welcome here to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time to appear on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great talking to you all the way in Belgium.
I've been wanting to do an episode for a while now on this topic of how to have more meaningful conversations and the importance of it. Because, it's like a huge shame how some couples, friends, family members, coworkers, like literally know each other for years without actually truly knowing anything about the other person. And through researching people for this episode, I came across your TEDx talk titled "How to Skip the Small Talk and Connect to Anyone," which, by the way, a big congrats because it's been viewed by more than 5 million people. Yeah, how does that actually feel?
Thanks. It feels very surprising because when I gave it, it was to a room of college students, about 100 to 200 people, and I had no idea it would be viewed by so many people all over the world. So I'm really grateful and intimidated also by that fact.
Yeah, that must be though. So yeah, for everyone listening, curious to check the talk out, I will link it up in the show notes. Now, you really sparked my interest to have on the show because of the platform you have founded, Big Talk, and the movement you're making with this in helping people connect more deeply with others. As you might very well be aware of, even though we are more connected than ever before, multiple studies have also shown that we're also more divided than we've ever been in history. Like, we're more likely to text someone than to actually talk to someone face to face. And, while loneliness is a complicated subject as it forms out of more reasons than one reason certainly is the fact that we're more online and offline, and with that, take away a major factor to our well-being and happiness, face-to-face connectedness. Therefore, I thought it was a critical topic to cover here on the podcast. So, thanks again for taking the time. Now, let me start this episode off with the following question, which is it could sound as a very simple question. However, I do think it will be a helpful one to bring an understanding about this topic of having more meaningful conversations. How would you define or describe what a meaningful or deep conversation is about and looks like?
Yeah, well, to me, and based on experience, a meaningful conversation is one that obviously skips the small talk, which means you're asking an open-ended question and raising a discussion about someone's personal experience, asking someone a question about a story from their life or their passions or opinions based on who they are as a person, not something external that anyone could answer. So a big talk conversation is something it covers a universal life topic, but it's actually very deeply personal.
Now, these two following questions that I have are very likely you've been asked like many times. So, my apologies for that, but it will help listeners to understand you better before we move deeper in the conversation. So you're the founder of Big Talk. Now, for someone who's never heard about it before, how will you explain to someone what the platform Big Talk is and what you're trying to achieve with it?
Sure. So in one sentence, Big Talk is about skipping the small talk to ask deeper questions and make more meaningful connections with people as a result of that. People in your life, strangers, family members, coworkers, and even yourself. And Big Talk actually started as a personal passion project while I was in college. It was the summer after my sophomore year of college. I had been thinking a lot about how lonely I had felt my freshman year of college, thinking that I was the only one who felt like that, which now obviously I realize is completely not true. So many people struggle through new transitions in college, jobs, when they move to a new place. And I didn't realize that I wasn't the only one feeling that way until it was the end of the year, and I had a lot of friends, and we all started opening up about the struggles we had gone through at the beginning of college. A lot of people said, yeah, I even saw school counseling. I was crying in my room a lot. I felt lonely, isolated, disconnected. And I said, me too. And so I said, if only we had these conversations earlier on and skipped the small talk, the usual, what's your major, where are you from type of conversation, to just be more honest about what we're feeling. And that's when the idea for Big Talk came into my mind. And then one summer while I was traveling, I was having a lot of really meaningful, deep interactions with all the people I met. I was in Ecuador and Germany, and I came back home and thought that I didn't want to lose this feeling, this magic of traveling and having these spontaneous, deep interactions. So I decided to combine my experience as a freshman and my travel experiences to make this video called Big Talk, where I filmed myself walking up to strangers throughout the LA area and skipping the small talk to ask them this question: what do you want to do before you die? And I talked to people from all walks of life: a homeless man, a businessman, an elderly woman, a teenage boy. And all these people, they looked very different on the outside, but many of them had really similar sentiments on life. And it was pretty powerful to see that it didn't matter who someone was, but if you had these types of deep conversations, you could really connect with them. And I posted this video to YouTube and Facebook, and it went viral. And the Huffington Post wrote about it, USA Today, different websites. And soon I started receiving messages from people all over the world who were asking for help how to make Big Talk. They had turned it into this term. When for me, it was just the name of a YouTube video. But then, how do I also make Big Talk? Or how can I start a Big Talk movement in my hometown? And since then, I haven't stopped working on it, helping to scale this concept beyond just me with a video camera, but actually help people run events in their towns or make Big Talk at work or in their personal lives. I made a card game of questions that skip small talk. I partnered with a prison startup that does education for inmates to use Big Talk as a way to reconnect with themselves and their goals upon being.
That's amazing, actually.
Yeah, so it's been really cool that just this pretty simple idea has expanded into so many different avenues. And I haven't been able to stop working on it because there always seems to be something else to do or to grow.
Yeah, so was it actually because you were receiving so many emails and comments from people that you wanted to take this social experiment further and create it into the platform it is today, Big Talk?
Yeah, exactly. There was a point where I just felt like it was a mission, almost like an obligation to keep working on this, because I was like, I created this thing that came out of a personal problem, personal need, and it's clear that it's helping people or people want it to be a part of their lives in some way. And I mean, this is just from emails and Facebook messages, Instagram messages, all sorts of things where people are just asking me. And I couldn't leave those be. I couldn't let them rest. And so if someone asked me, like, can you develop a Big Talk program for my school, then I would do it. They said, can you make me a custom Big Talk card because I want to marry this girl, propose to her with it? Then I was like, okay, I need to do it. So every time a request came, I would just do it. And that's how Big Talk kept growing.
That's amazing, though, that you kept going further with it, because it's definitely, yeah, it's like one of those things, right? Like with our own inner scars, like it's like everyone is walking around with something, right? But it's sort of that we only feel like we're the only ones sort of with scars inside. But the same way, like with deeper conversations, like we feel inside that we really want it, but it seems like from the outside that other people aren't interested in it. But it definitely is, though.
It always surprises me when people reach out to me that you would never expect. Like, I get a lot of emails from men in the Army. In the Army, communication is very strict and rigid, and we don't talk about our feelings. And I wish there was Big Talk in the Army. Or someone says, in my pro basketball team, we don't have enough Big Talk because it's more about the sports and showing masculinity. So those are the stories that really intrigue me to keep pushing this idea a little further and figuring out how it can help different groups.
So many, would say that small talk is more comfortable. However, if you actually ask people if they would rather engage in more meaningful conversations, most do desperately crave to have those and like to feel this deeper connection with others. Through Big Talk and the many people you've met in the events and workshops you've done, what have you come to discover are some of the fears most people have why they don't move to the Big Talk?
Actually, a lot of the fears are just simply not even knowing that these questions exist or are possible. But when they ask the questions, then it's not actually more scary than small talk. Sometimes more of a relief, because with small talk, it's almost like you're putting on this forced veneer in front of trying to have these conversations and be friendly and just talk about things that don't really matter, but just fill up space. Whereas Big Talk, you can almost relax into answering it because it's just speaking from the heart and from the mind of who you really are. So I think people are scared to ask the question, but once they ask, they realize it's actually easier.
That's a good point, actually, and that's something I actually agree with, though. Some people just don't know that you can ask certain questions like that. Now, a conversation requires, a balance between talking and listening. Like a good conversation is a dynamic thing, like it's going back and forward. If it isn't dynamic, and, this goes pretty much for everything, right? Like sex, kissing, dancing. If it's not dynamic, it gets very boring. And I personally feel through observing that many people have more non-dynamic conversations than dynamic conversations, where, for example, one person will be talking the whole time and the other person only but listening. Now, the good thing is that communicating is a skill that, greatly improves the quality of one's life as we're able to connect more deeply with others. I want to delve a bit deeper into the two parts a conversation is made of, listening and talking, and get a bit practical here. So let's start first with listening. This question might sound straightforward, but, why would you say listening is such an important factor to have a good and meaningful conversation with someone?
Yeah, I mean, listening is the most important part, really, because listening is how you engage and then make the connections and keep the conversation going. My friend joked to me the other day that Big Talk should actually be called Big Listen because it's really more about listening. So, once you ask the question or start the conversation, then it's really important to listen actively. So not just listen, but, be taking in what they're saying, finding the empathy within you to understand what they're going through and relating it back to yourself. And then hopefully being yourself and being authentic in your return question or statement, saying, oh, I also went through something like this, or I would love to learn more, and showing curiosity. And that's how you build those connections and learn from each other. And ideally, if you listen well and you find that connection, maybe you can even help the other person too. Maybe they said something that they're struggling with that you have the answer to, or could point them in the right direction. So listening is really the most important part of talking.
It is. And this always reminds me of a quote, which I have no idea actually from who it is, but it's something like this. Most of us don't listen with the intention to understand, but we listen with the intention to reply. So if you actually want to understand someone truly, you can do that only by actively listening. So you might have already shared a few pieces of advice, but do you have any other pieces of advice that you've come to learn over the years which made you a much better listener?
I mean, if I was to distill it down into a few points, like a checklist sort of when listening, the first is listen actively. So don't just listen, but, be taking in what they're saying and synthesizing it in your own mind. Next is showing empathy for the story they're telling.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe sort of empathy?
Empathy is hearing something that someone's saying or seeing something someone's experiencing and feeling like you can make that experience your own and being able to relate to it on some level. And then next would be being authentic. When you're listening or having conversation back and forth, just be yourself. It's so much better to just be yourself. And lastly would be being helpful. Like I said, if there's something that they say they're struggling with, then being able to point them in a direction that could help them, if you can, I think are the best points I've learned over the years about how to listen well.
Right. Yeah, those are actually good pieces of advice. Yes. So I myself, very much like you, it seems, love talking to strangers. And often when I enter a conversation with a stranger, I have the following thought or mindset, you could say, that only but one person like him or her exists in this entire world with this kind of unique story, past, and set of experiences. And, with that thought, literally a million of questions about this person entered through my head. Like, how can you not have questions for a unique being as this? And, this is not to say that all conversations and every person all of a sudden becomes super interesting, but it has more often than not led to great conversations. Now, the question I have here is the following. Many times, what is stopping us from doing something as talking to a stranger or, stopping us from seeing further as finding good topics to talk about is our mindset. Is there some kind of mindset or thought that is going on in your head when you approach or talk with a stranger?
I think the mindset is to not see them as a stranger, just a transactional being in your life, and see them as a person. Remove, the uniform or whatever is the external reason you're meeting with them for, and just see them as a human, like blank slate. Because I think it's so easy when you're at a grocery store or retail store to just see the person as the one who's scanning your goods, and you don't really think about that they have a family they go home to, or struggle, or reason for being there too. So having that extra layer of understanding helps to go when going into those sorts of conversations.
I like that, actually. And it's true, because a lot of times we just see, a bartender just alone as a bartender, but not that they are actually, people with their whole life. They also have a life, right? But we sort of see them in just the role that they currently have. And actually, yeah, like you said, looking beyond that, I definitely think you could be way more interested actually in them through that.
Just getting rid of that uniform. I wanted to do a Big Talk series called Big Talk in Uniform, and talk to people who were uniform you might have stereotypes about, and then just talk to them about completely different things, just normal human conversations.
Oh, that sounds actually like a really awesome idea. I feel like you should totally do that, though.
Okay, maybe I will.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So the last question I have about listening before we move to the other side, what a conversation is made of, talking, is, what if you're a bit too good of a listener? Are there any thoughts or pieces of advice you've learned by doing this work with Big Talk for those who feel they always seem to be the person who's listening?
Well, I think when you're listening, it's okay to also respond and talk after. Like I said, when you show empathy and relate something back to yourself, that's how you can build those connections. I think some people might be shy or introverted and feel like they shouldn't speak up about who they are. But, a conversation's a two-way street. So make it 50-50. It's okay to speak up and be your whole self in a conversation.
So let's move to the other part of a conversation, the talking part. Now, a reason why listening is such an important factor in a conversation is because it allows us to respond back with questions. Now, the quality of those questions greatly depends on how well you're listening. And there's also a great quote, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your questions, which is absolutely true. Better questions will lead to more meaningful connections, which will in turn greatly improve both your career and personal life. What are some tips and pieces of advice that have significantly improved your skill at asking better questions to move the conversation deeper? So
definitely first and foremost is asking open-ended questions, not just yes or no questions.
Is there an example you could say?
Oh, I have infinite examples of Big Talk questions that are open-ended. You could ask someone, I guess depending on the setting, but a fun one, at a social event would be, what are you curious about lately? Because that brings things into a really current, present moment, and people can go on forever. And everyone loves to talk about their passions or curiosities. And that's something that a lot of people just aren't asked. A lot of times the things we're curious about are the things that we're sitting alone in our bedroom Googling or tinkering with. So it helps open up what someone's really been thinking about. Another piece of advice for asking good questions is asking ones that will elicit personal stories from the person, where they could answer it through a personal experience that they're going through or have gone through in the past. And then finally, good questions are ones, especially if you don't know much about the person, are asking questions that are universal. So it doesn't matter who someone is, where they're from, what they look like. Any human being could answer that question regardless of their background. That's often been the most powerful part of making Big Talk and asking Big Talk types of questions.
Now, not every conversation we enter will be with a person we like, or, it might be about something we might not agree with what's being discussed. It's very likely that will happen, actually. However, that doesn't mean you can't have a good conversation in those moments. Are there any lessons you've learned through the many conversations you've had, how you can still maintain a meaningful conversation with someone you do not like or are in a disagreement with?
I'd say just remembering internally that everyone has something to teach you. And if you don't like what they're saying or who they are, then you've learned that you don't like that. And that's also valuable information in life. They say like sometimes in conversations or life that 90% of what you experience is just noise and 10% of it is the important stuff to really latch onto. But the noise also informs your life and your perspective as well.
True. And something that I also feel, when I'm seeing for myself, when I'm in a conversation with someone that where we're talking about something that I might not agree with what that person is saying, is to try to understand them and not to just get emotional. Because I feel like a lot of people might get emotional about a certain topic, or when something is being discussed they don't agree with, instead of trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's completely important. Everyone has a different experience and life perspective that's going to shape who they are. So just try to understand that rather than judge it.
Yeah, so I feel like we're ready to tackle a big question I assume many people listening wonder about. But first, let me ask the following question. And you already gave one example, but what are some examples of big talk questions?
Sure. Let me think. Some of my favorite ones are, what is your next adventure? What is one of the kindest things someone has ever done for you? What gives you hope? And what do you hope for? A good one to ask in a more professional situation is, what does success mean to you? Or what can you do today that you couldn't do a year ago?
How do you sort of come up with most of those questions? Like, did you, experimented sort of with them, or?
Yeah, those are questions I've sort of experimented with over the years, both just personally, and last year I did a Fulbright research project in Singapore where I was testing out which big talk questions would be useful across cultures. So figuring out what are questions that someone anywhere could answer or have an answer to. And then just trying different ones in different social situations, schools, businesses, and seeing what people can really speak to and enjoy answering.
Right. Okay. So the follow-up question that I had on that, how do we move to big talk with strangers, family members, friends, our partner? How can we make that move to go from the small talk towards the big talk with someone? How can you start opening people to start talking about more meaningful topics? Because it could maybe be a shock to directly ask, a big talk question.
I think that's one of the secret ingredients of having created Big Talk itself, is just that now I have this tool to be able to go into those conversations with, or anyone has this tool, right? Because it sounds much less intimidating to say, want to try out this experiment or this thing called Big Talk, than saying like, let's have a deep conversation right now. Sometimes they say, oh, there's, this thing I started called Big Talk, or people say, have you heard of Big Talk? Want to try it out and ask a few questions, or take the Big Talk card game and put it out on the table and have people just pick a card and choose one and answer the question. Or if you're an organization, then you can host a Big Talk style event, whether it's just like an icebreaker for a bigger event, or having a mixer or networking event itself using Big Talk questions. That's a way to get people engaged in making Big Talk.
I definitely like actually what you said in the beginning, to sort of say like, I kind of stumbled upon this thing called Big Talk. You want to try it out. It's a good icebreaker actually to start with that.
If you're seeing someone who also looks uncomfortable at a party, or looks like they're tired of all the small talk, you can just say like, hey, you look, bored of small talk too. Want to try out Big Talk?
Did you also create an app of Big Talk?
I haven't created an app yet. I've thought about it. I've been really hesitant to, because I'm scared that it'll just remove the whole point of Big Talk about meaningful in-person conversations if people use it the wrong way. So I've thought about it, but I just want to do it in the right way.
Of course, yeah. But that could also be a cool thing at some point, right? If you feel it's right for you, to kind of take out your phone and play through some of the questions.
Yeah, I think that'd be super fun.
So I have 3 more questions actually left for you. Over the years doing this work with the platform Big Talk, and the events, the workshops, the YouTube videos, engaging with numerous people, what general feeling do you feel is happening when you observe other people when they move to the Big Talk with others?
I think surprise and comfort. It's I think a lot of people come from these conversations or events like really surprised, saying, wow, I've known this person forever and I've never had a conversation like that with them, or I've never even asked myself these questions. And then just that awareness is pretty awesome. And some people are, I love when people get inspired and then say, oh, I run this group in my church, or this group for women entrepreneurs, and now I'm going to bring Big Talk over there and try it out with them. So it's cool when you see how it affects people's lives and how it spreads.
It's crazy though, if you never actually engaged with, in a deeper conversation with someone and then you actually do it. Life all of a sudden has a lot more depth to it all, right? So it's really cool actually that you're helping so many people with this.
It's also cool that sometimes it comes to people at different times in their lives. Some people have really had to ask themselves the big questions. And then suddenly, like for what happened to me is it wasn't until college when I really had to question all these things. But some people will message me and they're like 50 years old, or like they're talking about how they saw the talk and they realized like it would be helpful for their grandkids. So you just never know when you might hit a crossroads in your life where you start thinking about the bigger things, or just trying to understand yourself or the people around you better.
So I think you did already pretty much answer some of this question here, but how can people actually get involved with the platform Big Talk? Because there's, quite a bit actually that you're doing with it to help people get more engaged in meaningful conversations.
Yeah, sure. There's several different ways so far that people have done and that I'm still trying to figure out how to grow. But the first one is just hosting a Big Talk event or mixer or icebreaker in your own environment, whether it's your school, your job, your hostel, your hometown community center, your family around the dinner table. So just bringing the Big Talk concept there, whether it's, just raising these questions over dinner, or using the card game as a tool to help break the ice. So that's one way. Another way is creating a Big Talk style video or podcast or some sort of platform for yourself too, or the people around you, where you're asking these questions and recording them and sharing them with others as a way to inspire people. You can also, if you want to make Big Talk with yourself, you can journal answers to the questions. That often helps me when I feel stuck. It's just taking one of the questions and writing like a page-long journal entry about it.
Well, that would be an interesting way actually to get to know yourself better, yeah.
Yeah, it's super helpful. It's a great introspective activity. But there's so many ways. I mean, if you run a business, oftentimes, leadership doesn't really know the people on a different hierarchical level than them. But if you have some sort of Big Talk conversation or activity with them, or maybe newsletter going around where people answer the questions, that could be a way to get to know your coworkers better. A sports team told me that the coach said that he made Big Talk on the bus with his basketball team. So that's a cool idea if you have a team, using it as a way to bond with your team. So I don't know, there's so many different ways. Those are just a few.
And I also saw that, for those who know meetup.com, that there are a few meetups, right? That hold Big Talk.
I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I've seen on meetup.com that there's different meetups held all over the world where people who are part of a group or have just moved to a new city can meet with others and make Big Talk. Or Big Talk dinners are popular too, like having a Big Talk dinner with strangers. It's a way to get to know people over the course of one evening.
So a last question that I have here, besides the awesome pieces of advice and tips you have already given, are there any book recommendations or any other recommendations as videos or so for listeners on the topic of communicating or emotional intelligence to improve the skill in having more meaningful conversations?
I actually don't read a lot of books on connectivity from a more academic standpoint. I mean, I did a few when I was doing research. Right now, though, I am reading a book called Tribes about how modern culture has become a lot more isolated.
I've read that book actually too. It's from Sebastian Junger, right?
Exactly. But to me, reading fiction or really good autobiographies, to me, is a way of learning how to make Big Talk, because then you're really diving into someone's life and learning about who they are, and learning, they say reading fiction actually helps build empathy for people because you get into their minds and learn their stories. So rather than reading more of those kind of outside books about how to connect and what it means, and I actually love reading fiction, but I do read a lot of articles just to stay informed. Recently, I read an article that was talking a lot about loneliness and how loneliness is more lethal than smoking cigarettes. And, there's a lot going on about suicide and depression amongst young people, but really everyone today because of modern culture and technology. So I definitely stay informed as much as possible what's going on and figure out how I can learn about it and how Big Talk can fit in or help in some way.
Yeah, it's pretty, when you start reading a bit about, the studies around loneliness and the research being done around it, it's definitely good to be a bit aware of it, that we do need connection with each other. Let me actually ask then, well, first of all, actually, I'm curious to kind of know how far, what is your opinion so far of the book Tribe?
Well, I've only read a few chapters so far.
I see, yeah.
I like reading these books to get a broader context from an anthropological and psychological perspective. I think there's always going to be holes or things that could be further expanded upon or understood. But I think it's really interesting and something I've thought a lot about, even times when I just feel kind of displaced in modern society a bit, or just like a slave to my phone, or just the fact that I can be alone every day working on Big Talk and don't need this whole world around me, even though I crave it deep down. And it's kind of ironic that Big Talk's about making meaningful connections in person, but I spend so much time behind my laptop working on it. It would be wonderful to have a tribe of people around me and all supporting each other and working on it. So I think the book comes from an interesting perspective.
So the book actually talks quite a lot about that, which it's a really interesting book, though. I really loved it a lot.
Yeah, it's been great so far.
So let me just then add one thing here. Is there any favorite fiction books that you could recommend?
I don't want to give any favorites because I read so many random different kinds of things. I love books that cross cultures and, kind of epic books that tell the stories of people's lives and weave in multiple lives. And historical fiction is my favorite. I loved all of Khaled Hosseini's books, like The Kite Runner and 1,000 Split Suns. Right now I'm reading a book called Where the Crawdads Sing, about a young girl who lives in a swamp in the South. And that's...
From who is that book?
It's called Where the Crawdads Sing. The author is Delia Owens. And so I like reading books like that where it's from an environment that you would never see yourself in, but you can learn a lot about people and their world through it. And then there's just epic fiction like Gone with the Wind and Les Miserables and those classic books that I love.
Good books. Yeah, so I actually link up a few of those books. I think, it's a cool way actually to improve your empathy through reading fiction books. Kalina, I already like to thank you actually for doing this interview and for the many insightful answers. To finish this interview off, there is one final question I have for you that I ask all my guests. But before I do is, what is the best way for people to find and connect with you and with Big Talk?
Yeah. So there's a website for Big Talk, makebigtalk.com, which has so much of this information that I've talked about today. And there's also the Facebook page for Big Talk, and Instagram is Make Big Talk. There's a Facebook group, Big Talk. And I have a newsletter too that I distribute through Tiny Letter, which is just tinyletter.com/Kalina. And Kalina is spelled Kalina. So there's a lot of different platforms and avenues that I share Big Talk, like how-to content or videos and stories. Oh, and there's the YouTube channel, of course, youtube.com/makebigtalk.
Awesome. So I'll link that up for everyone to find in the show notes. So the final question that I have, from everything that you have seen, experienced, lived, and learned in your life, what is the one thing you know to be true?
That's a big question.
That is a big question, yeah.
Whenever you're feeling stuck or need help, the answers are in the people all around you. People you know, the strangers, the authors you read. So don't ever feel alone or like you need to be, in your own mind going through whatever internal or existential crisis. That reach out and ask for help from the people and the world around you.
I love that. Kalina, thank you once again for taking the time here to come on the podcast. It's, much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
There we have it, everyone. That concludes this episode on how to have better conversations thanks to our guest, Kalina Silverman, founder of Big Talk. Thank you for tuning in to the Inner Picture Stories podcast and for spending time here with me and Kalina. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable knowledge on how to have more meaningful conversations. As always, links about everything we talked about can be found in the show notes in the description of this episode. Likewise, some additional tips and advice can be found on how to improve your conversations even more. With that, you have a wonderful day out there, and we hope to see you on another episode, another journey here on the Inner Picture Stories podcast.